Hello. I guess it's a little bit over 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for coming to tonight's Austin Mobile and Web Game Developers Meetup. Glad to see lots of repeat visitors and lots of new faces here, so that's exciting to see some new people checking it out. Just wanted to say a few quick words to start the evening out. First of all, we're really excited to have Trent Polack speaking tonight, and he'll be up in about 10 minutes. Before he talks, we're going to have a quick 10-minute talk from Matthew from Autodesk, and he's going to be talking about MyLT, which I know that it might seem like kind of a drag to have like a sponsor component and have that taking up time, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be really great because he's going to get into a lot of interesting information about what this product is and what it can do and how it's really specifically geared towards indie developers and mobile developers and stuff. So I think it'll be really relevant to what all of you guys are interested in doing, and maybe you'll learn some stuff about 3D tools and animation and modeling process. So anyway, so we'll get to that in a minute. But definitely, huge thanks to Autodesk for their support. Obviously, these events couldn't happen without sponsors, and you couldn't have great food and drinks for you guys. So it's really appreciated that they're here lending that support. Also, at the beginning, I like to give people an opportunity to speak up if they have any collaborations that they're currently looking for, if they're looking to hire anyone for a particular position or collaborate with someone on a game project of any sort. So if you have anything to say in that regard, stand up and say who you are and sure.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Trent. I'm going to be talking in a bit. But we're looking to hire a game design intern immediately, part-time for the rest of the semester, and then full-time for the summer. And if anybody wants, to get into mobile game development, it's probably a pretty good step. And the boss is awesome. It's me. That was a joke. But yeah. So that's if anybody's interested. Cool. Or knows anybody is interested.
Yeah, thanks. Spread the word. Anybody else looking for anything? Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So I'm Greg with the Motion Software, so it's this mobile game development shop, and we've actually recently branched into doing some corporate apps as well. And so we're always looking for good talent, mobile developers, Android, iOS, and even other platforms, Windows, Mac, that sort of thing. So if, we're continuing to grow, so, definitely reach out to us if you have any interest.
Cool. Any other takers? Yeah.
My name is Norman, and I've been focused primarily on Unity programming, but I'm looking for a job right now, and I've also done some PHP stuff, so if you have work, let me know.
Cool. Anyone else?
My name is Chris Carroll. I'm a sound designer. I've been working in games in Austin for about 4 years and looking for some new mobile or web stuff. I have history in mobile and AAA titles.
Yeah, I can personally vouch for his skills. He's a great audio sound designer, so keep him in mind. So any other, anyone else have any opportunities they want to mention? Okay, I guess not. So, so I guess then we'll go ahead and hand it over to Matthew for him to real quick talk about MyLT.
Thanks, Todd. So, hi everybody. My name is Matthew. Let me go back a slide there. Oops. So, thanks for letting me present to you today and give me your attention. I know we're not here to see a commercial. I don't want to be a commercial, so I'm going to go through this as quick as I can. I also get nervous every time I do this, whether it's 10 people or 1,000. So if I talk fast, that's part of the reason. But anyway, I'm an ex-game developer. I've been working on games since the Commodore 64 days, off and on, for fun, professionally, AAA, indie projects, all that kind of stuff. I'm from Texas. I live in Houston, so I drove up here this morning to come see you guys. All right, so let's just go ahead and get on with the show. So, Autodesk. Most of you have heard of Autodesk. And Autodesk is pretty ubiquitous in the games industry for tools for making AAA games and all that good stuff. Killzone 3 made with Autodesk. Splinter Cell, Blacklist, Autodesk. Also, this is The Last of Us, a game I'm playing right now, which is really amazing. And incidentally, some of the character facial animations have up to like 90-something joints to do some really believable stuff, all built with Maya. Beyond Two Souls, over 70,000 character animations, all built with Maya. So if you've heard of Autodesk, I guess Autodesk, you've all pretty much heard of Autodesk. All right, so you've probably heard of Maya. You've probably heard of 3D Studio Max. You've probably heard of Softimage to a lesser degree. But those are our big flagship products in the games industry. But you've probably also heard that we cost a lot of money, which is just ridiculous amounts of money. Nobody got time for that, right? You don't want to spend all that kind of money, especially in an indie environment where you're trying to save money and your budgets and your projects are really short. Maybe your project's a mobile project, 3 months long, whatever. You can't afford like a $7,000 piece of modeling software. So that's where MyLT comes in. So MyLT is basically our answer to that ridiculous amount of money that our tools cost. How many of you actually heard of Maya? Okay. How many of you heard of MyLT? Wow, not many. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I'm here to educate you. So MyLT is basically a new product. It's not Maya Lite, despite the name, but it's basically a new product designed specifically for indie and mobile game development to do 3D and 2D art. So it's got all of the same code base as Maya. It's built on top of that code base. It uses the same user interface. So it's using that same pedigree that AAA developers are using, the same tool set. The difference is that, we'll talk about the difference in a minute. So let's actually just real quick, I have a 5-minute video. I'd normally do a video right here, a demo right here. So I'm going to show you a 5-minute video of MyLT in action. Let's see. Here we go. Let's just go ahead and play it. So what I want to show you is using MyLT with Unity. One of the things we're doing with MyLT is we're trying to make sure that it runs with Unity really well, it integrates. So what you're seeing here is I have a Unity game I put together with a character running and idling. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same character, add some animation in MyLT, drop it back into Unity. What I want to do is I have my idle and my locomotion, my running states here in the Unity Mecanum system. I want to add a fight animation to that. So I'm going to jump back into MyLT. Here's the same character with a rig using Human IK, our skeletal animation for full body inverse kinematics. So you can see what you can do with Human IK, really quickly create some believable animations that are very human-like. You can also take motion capture data. So I have some Kung Fu motion capture data here, just some generic mocap data I brought in from the package, MyLT. And I'm going to apply this motion capture data to my Human IK skeletal rig. That's very easy to do. Almost a push-button solution here. I'm just going to retarget it. It's called retargeting. Now I have that same mocap data on my rig. So now that I've got that mocap data, I just need to bake it into the skeleton. So the skeleton will have the actual animation keys. So that's also done with Human IK. Very simply. You'll see here in a second. Back to the Human IK menu, choose bake, bake to selection. Let Human IK do its calculations. And when it gets done, you'll see a bunch of red dashes along the bottom. Those are the keyframes of the animation applied to my rig, my skeleton. Now I can select my entire selection of meshes, select my entire selection of joints or bones, the skeletal part. I assume most of you are familiar with skeletal animation and stuff. And now I'm just going to go ahead and, after I've selected all that, I'm going to send it straight to Unity using MyLT's built-in send to Unity feature. Here we have the send to Unity, send selection. I'm going to save it as a FBX file format. And now inside of my Unity project again, there's my fighting animation, all ready to go. It's using Mecanum. I did a little setup ahead of time there, just a bunch of checkboxes and stuff, but otherwise, there you go. There's my fighting animation, if you can see it in the bottom right there. And now we need to create a new animation state inside of the Mecanum animation tree here. And we're going to call it fight. All right, and now we just need to apply that animation fight as our motion. And that's in my assets folder here. There's my fight animation. Okay, and now we're just going to create transitions from the idle to the fight, and then back from fight to idle. Now on the fight, you can see that we've got our add 2 animations here, blending from fight to idle. So there's my fight animation. And I'll jump ahead here to the idle. Probably could have done that a little faster. There we go. So we got our animation transition. And now I'm going to add a parameter down here called fight, just a Boolean parameter. How many of you actually worked with the Unity mechanical system? Yeah, so some of you understand how it works. Well, the ones of you that haven't used it, at least you can see how simple it is to do. All right, so I've added my fight Boolean, and now I'm going to, in my idle pose, make sure the condition to go from idle to fight is fight true. Simple as that. Then I'm going to go into my character controller script, which is a C# script inside of Unity. Here I am in mono develop. I'm just going to go into my update function, which happens every tick of the game. And inside there, I'm just going to test for keyboard input. Very simple with just a few lines of code. I'm going to test for key down and key up. Key down, F key, key up when I release it. And my idea is that if I press that key, he's going to play that animation. So this is a prototype, right? So this isn't necessarily ultimately what you would do on your final game, but it shows you how quick and easy it is to take an asset from my LT and then iterate on that by adding more animations, adding a little bit of code to make it all work. It's a really tight integration. It works really well together. Type faster. So there we go. We're setting the animator's fight Boolean to true. That's if I have the key down. And when I release the key up, we'll set it to, I assume, false, probably. So you don't have to be like an expert senior engineer to do this stuff. This is junior engineer stuff, scripter stuff. All right, so that's pretty much it. Could have just copied and pasted, I guess, and jumped to the end. Else if instead of an if. All right, and then we'll just jump back into Unity, play it, and that's it. Now, when I walk around, you'll see that when I hold down the F key, which you can't actually see me doing it, but so it's that simple. I mean, it's a really good integration, really tight with Unity, and we're actually working to improve that integration to make it even better. All right, so let's jump back into the presentation real quick, and I'm almost done. All right, so we saw it. That's good. Oh, can it do 2D? So I assume some of you are 2D developers? Yes? Okay. So real quick, just another quick demo here I want to show you. And then we're almost done. And I'll let you guys get on to the real fun stuff. So this is just something I put together real quick inside of Adobe Flash using ActionScript. This is basically using the same assets, the character and building models I put together, rendered them out as 2D images from my LT, put them together with some ActionScript, created a simple platformer, did that in a day. So you can really build some cool, impressive stuff, even 2D stuff, using my LT to render the assets out, or use them as real time. All right, so let's jump back in here. Okay, so last few things I'd like to talk about is my LT is meant to be super responsive. What the hell does that mean? That's what my little acronym up there means. You can use that, by the way. I'm not going to. It's not like Autodesk copyright. It's like, we're all big about like, what do they call that now? Creative Commons? Oh, what happened? There we go. Creative Commons license is real big at Autodesk now. So we're like giving away all of our like artwork and stuff that we work on to people that want to just take it and run with it. Anyway, super responsive. That means that my LT has a dedicated team. It's not just the Maya team, and it's actually a Maya LT team working on it, and we're releasing every 3 months. So every 3 months we put out a major extension, and they're always based on user input and feedback. So some of the feedback we got, they wanted more Unity integration. That's where the Cindy Unity got added in that you just saw. Our next major extension, 3 months later, was mail scripting. We didn't have mail scripting originally. A lot of people complained, so we put mail scripting into my LT. Now you can actually build your own pipeline tools and workflow, things that speed up your workflow and stuff directly in Maya. Now, I was going to tell you some cool stuff that's coming out in the next release of my LT 2015, which is going to be very soon, but we're live streaming, and so because of that, I can't say anything right here in front of the camera. So if you want to come up afterwards, come to the Autodesk thing back there. I'll be happy to tell you what's coming out because there's some really impressive, it's the biggest release we've done yet with some really impressive game-related tools that are going to help speed up the workflow. All right, so how much is it? Any guesses? Guesses? Come on, give me a guess. How much?
600.
Huh?
600.
600? Okay.
Microtransactions.
Microtransactions? First of all, this isn't China and we're not in MMOs. No microtransactions. So, do I hear that's catching on here? Yeah, you would think it would be pretty expensive. We're Autodesk, right? We're gotta make the money, but we're trying to make this for and with indie developers, so we're very conscious of the price. Now, yes, there's a perpetual license. You can buy it outright, but I don't recommend that. Instead, I recommend you pay $50 a month to rent it. That's the way you start thinking as an indie developer. Start renting your software, because you have a 3-month project. Why buy this big, expensive piece of software when you can just rent it for $50 for 3 months, or quarterly or yearly, $33 a month, pretty cheap. If you got an independent contractor that needs to do some models, $33 a month for a year, or I can't remember what it is quarterly, but really cheap.
40s.
40s?
For a quarter.
Yeah. So, don't buy the software, rent it. And when you rent it, the other cool thing is you get all the major updates, even the next major revisions. As long as you're renting, you get everything. So, better choice. That's it. So, contact me there. Matthew Doyle Art is my Twitter, my blog also. So, MatthewDoyleArt.com. Go to Autodesk My LT. Thanks. Cool.
So yeah, thanks again to Autodesk, and thanks to Matthew. That was definitely snappy and informative. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to Trent. I think he has to do some cable swapping and running around the computers.
Yeah, let me get out of your way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I'm good. I'm done.
It was good. I finally got productive at the end of the day. It was like 6:30. I'm like, and I'm in such a hole. Crap, I gotta go. It's really cold outside. I have my hood up.
I drove down to the shop.
Yeah, this is like a good part. Yeah,
Nice to meet you. I assume all of you guys work together.
Yes. You're surrounded with people behind you. So you have to like Trent.
All right, no potential like Trent.
Yeah, no big deal, but like me.
You can hate the presentation.
Yeah.
Like me.
All right, so I'll just get started. Hi, I'm Trent. I'm the creative director with Team Chaos here in Austin. We are a sister company to Chaotic Moon Studios, which is
Sorry.
they're from there, by the way. They do a lot of mobile app design and client work, and we basically just make games. We are at about 12 people total. We have about 6 or 7 concurrent projects right now, and basically that means that we work a lot. The title of my talk is called Scattered Thoughts. I almost thought I spelled that wrong for a second. I didn't. Good. On a fragmented industry. Basically, what that means is I had no idea what I was going to talk about, and I tend to ramble. So this fit. What I really wanted to focus on was over the last year, I've gone through, I used to work at a company called Lightbox Interactive. We had an exclusive contract with Sony. We were working on PS3 games. Our big release was Starhawk. We worked on that for about 3.5 years. And then most of that company got laid off, and we switched to being a mobile studio. And then I ended up leaving Lightbox and joining Team Chaos, which was just finishing production on their first game, Elements. So shortly after Elements, I joined Team Chaos as a senior game designer and then got promoted to creative director. And then basically, I was trying to figure out how to tell people what I do. And I think that the dog actually is the best representative of this, because it's true. I on a day-to-day basis, I don't think I know what I'm doing. And I'm okay with that. I kind of like it. It makes my day interesting. It probably makes other people's days interesting, for better or for worse. But I figured, that's a good place to start. But before I really go into that, I kind of wanted to just start with my background, because I think I've always loved games since I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I grew up in the industry. I always wanted to be in games, except for like this brief period where I really didn't ever want to be in games. And I think that all of that background is kind of interesting, and it kind of leads me to where I am right now. So a lot of this is going to be kind of just me talking about like why I thought the way I thought at times, and how I think it got me to where I am today. And then I'm sure the more useful and practical stuff, like I have no practical information to share right now. Like I don't have a walkthrough or anything of any kind. But I encourage anybody to ask questions about anything practical or like really specific. If it's pressing, just ask it at the time. If not, wait till the end of the talk and ask it then, but I don't really care. So yes, like I said, I'm Trent. That's me from like 3 days ago. I list the games, the shows, and movies I like, and I did that for kind of a reason. First of all, if you're in games and you can't list the games you like, then get the hell out. I don't think that's good. I don't think it's a good industry for people that just kind of say, I kind of want to make games, and then you ask them why. What are some of your favorite games? Like, I don't know. And that's just not. It's not really an industry that supports that kind of mindset, I don't think. It's a lot of passionate people, and there are a lot of passionate people, and there are a lot of passionate people who do very, very good work. So I think not really having that kind of passion is maybe not the best fit for this particular industry, especially right now. So I put Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy Tactics, Battlefield 4, Far Cry 2, and Diablo 3. The shows I like are Supernatural, Justified, The Shield, Terriers, and The West Wing. And the shows are actually relevant to this presentation, I promise. The movies aren't, but they're awesome. Sweet Smell of Success, Brick, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Cabin in the Woods, and Rosemary's Baby. Those have no place whatsoever.
I'm really sorry to bother your class.
Hi!
I'm looking for Mark Phillips. That sound familiar at all?
I am not him.
There's another talk on the
Might be on the other
You're
yeah,
alone now.
across the way.
You should turn down for pizza.
Someone has your Mark Phillips.
Yes! I was perhaps that one.
Domino shirt.
I don't have my glasses on, I can't see that. All I saw was a blur asking me about Mark Phillips. So see, these are some of the games I've worked on in the past. It's kind of hard to tell, but basically this is Starhawk. These are some indie games I worked on the side. These are some games I worked on when I was first getting started in the industry. This is Dragon Academy, one of the games that we released at Team Chaos very recently. This is Dragon Trials, another Team Chaos game that we released very, very recently, like a week ago. And this is a game called The Political Machine 2008 or 2012. And I think that game in particular is worth calling out because there are going to be points in your life where you do things that are horrifying. It actually, it was an interesting game to work on, and it was a really, really cynical game to work on because you're basically, you're trying to take a candidate from the announcement of their candidacy for president to actually being president. And in doing so, you have to, acknowledge the fact that there are some scenarios in which case nightmares exist. And that this face haunts me. That's all I'm saying. So I've worked on a lot of games, and to kind of get this far, I've done a lot of varied background things. I'm from northern Michigan. Originally, I grew up all over Michigan, but for the most part, I grew up in a little town called Kalkaska, Michigan, which is, it sounds a lot like Alaska. It gets more snow than Alaska, and it's cold. And there's also really not a lot. Before Michigan ever passed the School of Choice Act or law, or basically that allowed you to go to whatever school you wanted to, whether you were in the district or not. My school was a one-room schoolhouse. K through 8th grade, a total of 30 kids. And so that's like, this room was my entire K through 8th grade school. And right down the middle was the division. K through 4 were over here, 5th through 8th were over here. And teachers basically got lazy about halfway through the semester and only taught 8th grade on one side and 4th grade on the other side. So there is a significant part of my life where I never learned anything from 5th or 6th grade. I knew, what do you learn in 8th grade? Algebra?
Sure.
Sure. I learned algebra, never learned long division, ever. I never learned basic grammar, ever. And I'm sure whatever other topics you cover in 5th and 6th grade, those are gaps in my life. But then I got to go to a bigger school, which had a total of 300 kids, and that was huge. But still, the point is, I lived in a very, very rural area. The closest house to mine was about a mile away. I lived on a pseudo farm, which is going to explain this next picture in the next slide that is about 12 years old and terrifying. I forgot that I put it in until right now. But basically, over the course of the last 13 years, I've worked as a bag boy, a door-to-door salesman, a PR person, a writer, an author of programming books, an indie game developer, a AAA game designer, a mobile game developer, a game contractor, a mobile game designer, and at one point, a programmer on satellite monitoring software for the Ulysses spacecraft, which has since been decommissioned. And I really hope I had nothing to do with that. That was also, I like this bullet point because it sounds awesome. It was the worst job I've ever had. It was bag boy, higher ranking than spacecraft. Because it was just like this tiny room with this keyboard that you actually had to I had to bulk up in order to use a keyboard. And it was just monotonous, it was boring, it was cold, it was just, it was painful. But that happens. And then it got decommissioned about 6 months later. So I'll always have that mystery. So I want to focus on before college, and this is a horrifying picture of me on my farm back when I was 16 years old. As you can see, there's nothing in the distance except trees and green, because there's nothing in the distance except trees and green. Before college, and basically throughout high school, my parents are very, very big fans of working. So I worked a lot. I always had a job of some kind. I started my first job as a bag boy, and it was not exactly glorifying, but it was fun. The summer after that, I was a door-to-door salesman, which was the second worst job ever, because I specifically was trying to sell people siding, roofing, and windows. Wow. And if you've ever gone up to somebody's house at 8 o'clock in the morning, knocked on the door, and tried to tell them that they need to spend $10,000 to repair their house, there's rejection is a strong, well, it's not a strong enough word. I think I made one deal all summer. But so after all of those, I wanted to I started getting more involved in programming and computers, and I wanted to start making games. So I got a lot of books, and I got a lot of books off Amazon, because that was how I spent my time. That was the best way for me to learn. We had one 28K modem in our house, so the internet was there, but it was slow, and it was shared between on the same phone line as a mother, a father, and a sister all had to use. So it wasn't the most reliable thing in the world, so I just had a lot of books. One book in particular was called Tricks of the Windows Game Programming Gurus by Andre Lemov. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that name before. He wrote a lot of game programming books back in the, I think, mid to late 90s. And he's a super nice guy. He talks pretty down to earth about programming and just starting from scratch as much as possible and writing all your own code. And I read that book, I think, from front, and it's a thick fucking book, from cover to cover about 5 times, I think, before things finally took. And it led me to a lot of different online communities, and that's how I started getting involved with. That's basically my introduction to programming and like learning how to make games. Is getting involved with those communities and just talking to people and just being on like IRC or AOL Instant Messenger and starting all these groups like, guys, let's make a big MMO. Then 3 days later, everybody forgets and nothing ever happens. But you always end up having these projects and meeting these people, and eventually you meet people that you kind of weirdly persist throughout your life as you learn more and grow. And it was a weird kind of way to make friends, but it was also a great resource as somebody who didn't know anybody who even cared about playing games, much less making them in my area. And it was through the author of this book that led me to this book called Game Programming Tricks of the Trade, which was not a good book. But it was my first opportunity. I was asked to write for it. So I submitted 2 chapters for that book, and it was the first thing I've ever gotten published at I think 16 or 17. And that was definitely a big experience for me. And I learned a lot, and I met a lot of new people. That led me into a book called Focus on 3D Terrain Programming, which was my book, which was my junior year job in high school. Was writing about 3D terrain programming in book form, and I think it was 280 pages or something. Along with talking to college professors and professional game developers, and doing the research and trying to figure out what people were using and just putting it into book form, using my 16-year-old head's idea of what math was, which was lacking at times, and definitely could not do long division. So the last book that I think I ever worked on was called Graphics Programming Methods, and that's, if we look at this as an evolution, this is the holy grail, because this book was amazing. It was put together, it was edited by a guy named Jeff Lander, who was hugely instrumental in Game Developer magazine back when it was getting started, and used to write these super insightful graphics columns. He's just an asininely smart guy, and he edited together this book with all of these other luminaries in graphics programming, and it's all of these crazy topics about things that I didn't know anything about, but I didn't know about terrain at that point. So I got to write a chapter about terrain programming in that book, and it was really cool actually. It's the of the body of high school published works that I did, it is the one I can look back and say, yeah, I worked on this. No, ignore those. That's nothing. But this is awesome. And so at this point, I'm going to college, and I'm thinking I definitely want to make games. I love games. I still want to do it. I like doing it. So I obviously need to go to college and make games. Or maybe I don't go to college at all. Financially, it probably would have made way more sense not to go to college. My parents really wanted me to go to college. So I made a deal with them that I'd apply to one college, and if I didn't get in, then I wouldn't go. So I applied to the University of Michigan, which I should have chosen a cheaper school, because one of the first things that U of M tells all of their prospective students is that they are the second most expensive public school short of MIT. And it's true. They are very expensive. And I did get in. So I went to school. This is Michigan's Law Quad, which is actually, this is a pretty boring picture, but it's a gorgeous building. So when I went to college, I enrolled in computer science and engineering because I wanted to be a computer programmer. I got bored really quickly, and for a lot of bad reasons, kind of. First of all, I've never been a great student, especially when I think that I know more than the class is going to be teaching me. It was weird. I was arrogant. I'm the only arrogant college student ever. But aside, even getting past that, that arrogance aspect, there was something about the curriculum of game developers, especially at U of M, that turned me off. Which is there's a hyper competitiveness to it. People didn't like collaborating, people didn't like working with each other, people didn't like talking to each other. Everybody wanted to do their work, they wanted to do it themselves, they wanted to do it well, and they were very serious about it, which is not at all what I want, ever. So as a combination of just kind of arrogance and really not being interested in the program, I did poorly my first year of school. Then I switched to English. Well, actually, I momentarily considered dropping out of school and joining the Marines, which I did not do because I am a tiny, tiny, scrawny person. And that was probably a good decision. But I switched to English because I grew up reading, and I figured I needed to make some kind of major change because this whole engineering thing wasn't really working out for me. It was just making me unhappy and angry. So I thought back on like high school and some of the college classes I had taken that I did like, and a lot of it kind of geared back towards teaching. So I kind of switched my major to English, and I wanted to focus on secondary education, computer science, and creative writing. And that ended up being probably the best education decision I could have made. It definitely did not help me get jobs or anything, so don't ever think that, but it did. I think I learned more about critical thinking and like how to write, like put my thoughts into words, not concisely, clearly, but I can put them into words, than anything in any programming class or any engineering class had ever even broached the topic of talking about. And it made me kind of branch out. So instead of, I still ended up taking a lot of math classes and linear algebra and Calc 1 through 3 and discrete math and all of that, but that's just because I wanted to prove that I could do it. And that was more of just me being stubborn. But I also had to, as a result of switching to English, had to take things like Greek and Roman mythology and a lot of Shakespeare, a lot of English lit, a lot of religious classes too, which was weird. But it was also super interesting. But one thing that was important is that I always kept programming on the side, which came in handy when I got to the realization that I needed money as I approached the end of my senior year and had to take two spring and summer semesters to catch up on the failure of my first year. So I took my first job at a company called Polack in Michigan. I was a game developer intern. I knew some people purely through just random connections, and they were looking to hire an intern, so I joined that company, their games team specifically, and worked as a game development or game programming intern for a summer. And I got to do things. So I was basically hired, and then I showed up my first day, and they said, "You're going to write the map editor tool." And I'm like, "Okay." That's it. That was all the instruction I got for my first like 2 or 3 days. Just, you're going to write a map editor tool, and that was an interesting first day. It ended up being for a game called Elements, which would not ship until like 4 or 5 years later. I was gone by that point, but they were stuck in my code, which is hilarious. So as an intern, I wrote tools. I wrote a bunch of different tools. Eventually, the map editor and there was like a tile editor because it was a tile-based strategy game. Quest editor, all these different tools and editors, and some basic gameplay code. And then I was brought on full-time and continued writing tools. I rewrote their proprietary 3D engine because at some point, once their project had gone on long enough, I just kind of had to come up with things to do on my own. And so I found things that I wanted to do, and that's what that was. So I rewrote their 3D engine. I did gameplay programming across a few different projects, like Political Machine. They have a strategy game called Galactic Civilizations that I worked on. And then I did design consulting on 2 games called Sins of a Solar Empire and Demigod, both of which were more published by Stardock than developed by them, but it was my first experience working with a more traditional game development company, which was super interesting because I found out that there were people called game designers that didn't necessarily have to only do programming or only have to work on tools or anything like that. They actually got to write, or they got to come up with ideas, or they got to work with other branches of the company. Like as a programmer at Stardock, I found that basically I would show up to work, I'd sit at my desk, I'd program all day, and I'd go home. There wasn't a whole lot of like socialization being encouraged there, and that was depressing, I think, a little bit, at least for me. So through that exposure to these other companies and these other processes, I just was starting to think, like, is this what I want to be doing? So I put on my horse thinking mask, and I just kind of thought about like what my career was doing at that point. I wasn't teaching, and even though I ended up still being in games for a while, this was about 2.5 years out of college at this point. I had always, and still eventually would like to be a teacher. I think it'd be fun. But I wasn't teaching, I wasn't working closely with others. I was basically just back my freshman year of college all over again, just competition and people working very isolated with each other, and not with each other, and not getting excited about what they were working around or working on. There were neat ideas that were like being thrown around that weren't ever being explored or thought about very much. People didn't seem to be challenging themselves, they just seemed to be working their jobs, which is fine. It's never been one of my ambitions. Work is very, I grew up in a very hardworking family, so work has always been very important to me. So one of the things that I get like really antsy about is if I'm bored at work, I start just thinking that I need to make some kind of change. And I think the worst part of that first job is there was never a time after about 1.5 years of working there that I wasn't acutely aware of what time it was, which,
No flow.
There was flow. It was slow and constant. It was just constantly like, I would get to work at like say 10 o'clock, and I'd always, if anybody would ask what time it is, I'd be like, it's 11:40 right now. What time is it? 2:30. What time is it? Shut up. And then I'd go home at 6 o'clock every day, and did that for about 9 months, and then I realized that I needed to find a new job. So I wanted to, while I was searching for jobs, I needed to identify what was important to me. And I definitely did want to stick with games. Basically, this was I'm going to give games my one more shot moment. I believe in playing games. Like I think playing games is very important, at least for me. And I think for people, anybody that just enjoys games or just like. Everybody has their love and their passion. Mine's always been just playing a game, playing with rule sets, and like my family, my mom and I would always sit down at Christmas and like sit down and play Scrabble for like hours, and that's how we entertain ourselves. I also don't want to ever be content with like any given situation. I don't like taking things for granted. I don't like not learning. I don't like not pushing myself. I wanted to be able to like have ideas and kind of be able to do something with those ideas, which is not always a production happy concept, because sometimes you are going to have ideas that are awesome and amazing that you just have to just tuck somewhere while you actually get your work done. But basically, I want to figure out how to do more of what I like doing, and in this case, that meant probably going more into game design as opposed to game programming, which up until fairly recently, at that point in my life, I didn't know was a profession. I thought you were either a programmer or an artist, and that's it. So with those goals in mind, I kind of just updated my mission. Wanted to get into game design, which I said I did not know was an actual profession. I wanted to work around passionate people, and I wanted to work around people that were excited about games. And it's around this time that I don't know how, I started either just listening to podcasts or reading a lot more, just news sites. But a game called Far Cry 2 came out at some point, and it was a game by Ubisoft Montreal, and the creative director on that game is Trent Honking. He is a remarkably amazing, intelligent guy. He is, as far as I'm concerned, the if you're gonna ever listen to somebody talk about game theory or game design, like it's this guy. He was able to articulate concepts and ideas better than anybody in the field, I think, has even gotten close to approaching. And I just would listen to a bunch of his talks from various GDCs over the years, or just read an interview that he's giving about his game, and he'd always turn it like some boring ass question, like how many levels does your game have, into something like into a meaningful response. Like, well, we don't really think about it like levels. We just have this open world, and we try to like let you go into it, and then we just, try to encourage the player to systemically explore the world. Like, and what a reporter does with that is say, well, does that mean not many? But he's a really great guy. If you haven't ever heard him talk, definitely just go look up some of his talks. He has a blog. He has a lot of archived GDC talks, and he's just an amazingly smart dude. And and it was through him that my new goal became to become a creative director someday. That was like an actual goal I stated. And that was a goal I stated when I applied for my second job, which I got at Lightbox Interactive. That's my victory pose. I had to move across so this is the first time I would have ever actually moved out of Michigan. I lived in Michigan all my life. Lightbox Interactive was formerly known as Incognito Studios, and were owned entirely by Sony. They did Twisted Metal Black, they did a game called War of the Monsters, and they did the PS3 game called Warhawk, and through some weird lineage, the original PlayStation 1 version of Warhawk, which came out in like 1992. It had full motion video cutscenes with terrible acting, and they're amazing. So I accepted that job. I moved to Salt Lake City. It was a transitional kind of thing because the studio itself was moving to Austin. Actually, they were all moving right across the street from this building. It's the white unmarked business building across the street. And some of them are still there. So I lived in Salt Lake City in a hotel for 3 months, in an entirely different environment, on an entirely different project with an entirely different set of people, and in an entirely different mindset, and it was kind of terrifying because I basically quit my steady job, left my family, and went out into this like whole new just world of potential like hurt and pain and suffering, and Utah, which is gorgeous. But is anybody here from Utah? It's gorgeous.
My wife is.
Your wife is lovely. Utah's lovely though. It's just the people are kind of mean. But Salt Lake City actually is an amazing city in the sense that I've never seen mountains before.
Oh man.
So yeah, and it's all mountains. It's all mountains. It's all mountains and anger. That's the best description of Utah. But I was only there for 3 months and I lived in a hotel. It was a weird experience. But then I moved to Austin and continued to work on the then unannounced Starhawk. So year one on Starhawk, I worked as, I'm gonna actually have to read this because I don't remember what I wrote. I started as a scripter and level designer. I worked on a variety of demo levels and multiplayer modes. I worked with the one other designer, the lead designer, to assemble our design team. Worked on mission specs, worked on system specs, wrote and prototyped various mission walkthroughs, and wrote and did, sorry, let me reread. Wrote and prototyped various mission walkthroughs several times as we experimented what we wanted the actual game to be. Because we had a pretty exceptional long pre-production phase on Starhawk. This was my first AAA game, so I didn't know this. But it was about a year and a half of just exploring various ideas. And you start with one level and you keep remaking it over and over and over and over again until it's reflective of the one that you want to take into production. So I got really good at making that one level, and then we rolled into production. But that was about a year, and I loved it. It was great. We ended up with Lightbox had about 13 people when I started, and we ended up after our first year with about 48 to 56. and they were like my family. Like some of these guys moved from Utah as well, but we all moved to Austin to get, it ended up being a lot of people that moved to Austin just to take this job, and some people that were already here, so they had established communities, but for the most part, there's a lot of orphans that just all found friends, and it was like this one big kind of corporate family. Not as culty as it sounds, but so year 2, this is our design team, year 2. We're a bunch of white dudes. That's us with hats. Year 2, continue to work as a system designer, which basically just means a lot of gameplay mechanics that I wrote and balanced and scripted and prototyped. I also worked as a campaign mission and level designer, a technical designer. All of those basically kind of roughly equate to the same role at this company, which is just write a lot of script and make a lot of levels and write a lot of documentation about what you kind of want the game to be. We were still kind of in a pre-production role in that we were still experimenting with a bunch of different ideas. Not all of those would bear fruit. Some of those would bear fruit, but we realized just couldn't be done. So it was still a lot of experimentation, which was a lot of fun, actually. But we were still barely on the cusp of like ending pre-production and going into production. And once you're in production, you're in like serious like stop wasting time mode. So you stop getting to experiment with stuff and just have to just plow through your entire schedule. And basically, for the duration of my second year there, it was just a lot of balancing, playtesting, and then iterating on ideas. It was, I think at some point we might have announced that the game existed. I can't remember if that was the third year or the second year, but we did it right here, and we flew down a bunch of press. It was a Sony published game, so they really like burning money. So we flew press down, we rented out the Alamo Ritz entirely and just like renovated it for this game, this unveil, invited press down here, had this big shindig, had this big custom wooden etched PlayStation 3 with the game engraved on it, had a replica of the game's signature gun, and all of this other weird stuff. But one awesome thing is that the composer of Starhawk's soundtrack was a guy named Christopher Leonards, who also is the composer for one of my favorite shows ever, Supernatural, and I was totally geeking out about that the entire time that game was being made. And it ended up, Christopher Leonards ended up working with a guy named Chris Westlake, who we ended up using for our main theme for Dragon Academy and Dragon Trials when I joined Team Chaos. So it's a lot of like weird, like, what's the Kevin Bacon thing? 5 degrees, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Yeah. There's lots of weird separate that word. So year 3 is, holy shit, it's year 3. You continue development. I started watching a lot of television shows while working because there's always like this known quantity of work, and there's this huge database of bugs. And the database of bugs does not go down. It doesn't. You might think it goes down. It does not go down. It just keeps going up and up and up until
you release.
Well, actually, at some point you just black out, and then it's April and the game's out. But I started watching a lot of television shows to get through. Like I would just always keep a TV show on my second monitor while I was working, and that's basically how I kept saying during the insane third final year of this game's development. I learned that console certification is not fun. I think Sony had 3 full-time studios doing Q&A on the game, and it was being localized in 21 different languages, and each language of the game had its own bug database, and each language of the game had its own unique bugs, written up by people that did not speak English. So that was fun. That was AAA development. Towards the end, let me see where my next slide is. Oh, so we eventually launched. That's the game. It's in space. There are things blowing up. It is a AAA game. next slide is awesome because I was watching Justified a few weeks ago, and I forgot that there's this tiny scene where this bunch of stoners are just playing Starhawk in the background. It's awesome. I am so happy about it. At some point, I got promoted to senior game designer at Lightbox Interactive, and we were moving on to let's see, what can I say? We were moving on to a different platform that would then become the PlayStation 4, and we were working on a prototype game. That's all I can say about it. And they get very serious about the things that you say about the games that they don't like you talking about. So we were working on that. It was going to be awesome, actually. This game was going to be super, super amazing until that happened. We all got called into a conference room. Actually, no, this is not how it happened. We did not all get called into a conference room one day. I came into work. I usually come into work at like 10 to 11. And I got called into my boss's office by myself as soon as I got in, which none of those have happened ever. Like, first of all, that people are there and like suddenly have time for you right when you walk in the door. That's never a good thing, ever. And this conversation, and I'm saying, so he said, "Shut the door." I was like, "Should I get Josh, who was their lead designer at the time and my direct boss?" So this was with this company CEO, I guess. So it's me and the CEO talking. Should I get Josh? She's like, "No, I'll talk to him later." Oh, wow! So I sat down and he starts telling me about, all of these things that are happening. And there's like 15 minutes of conversation going on about like what Lightbox is gonna do next, and how sorry he is that all these things are happening. At no point during this 15 minutes was it ever said that I was not fired. Everything was said about like everybody else is basically gonna get fired, but it was never said, "Oh, by the way, you're not getting fired. You still get to keep your job." So I stayed on with this we had this skeleton crew of like 8 people left at Lightbox basically once all these layoffs were done. We were gonna move into the mobile space. Which is a really great way to start that conversation, not just all the bad news. And so then I walked around the studio doing work as normal for the next three or four days while it was figured out whether or not we actually did get the game shut down, which is the worst position to ever be in. Walk around the studio with a bunch of your friends telling them about the tasks that you don't think they'll ever gonna get to do. That's super depressing. So we went mobile at Lightbox. A lot of my friends ended up leaving Austin. But I mean, after 3 years on one game, a shorter mobile project cycle sounded kind of awesome. It was a super sad situation, and I still miss a lot of my friends a lot. But it also felt like an opportunity to finally do all the things. We're not. I had a lot of love for everybody at Lightbox Interactive. They basically just took me from this tiny little Michigan kid to this tiny little Texas kid. But after a few months, it wasn't really working for some reason. It was nothing about the project. The mobile, just like something about it didn't feel right. Maybe it was just being in kind of the same office without the same people. And I wasn't sure, but basically I got back into feeling like I wasn't actively pursuing my goals anymore. And so I found a new job, which is the job I have now, which is the job I'm finally actually talking about, which was senior game designer for Team Chaos. I came in, when I started back in March, we were just finishing up Elements, Broken Lands, which was a mobile CCG. It was actually it was a lot of fun. It was the first kind of game of that type that I've worked on in a while. It had a lot of really rad features. It was really polished. It was really well done. And I mean, personally, my job description suddenly became I got to write fiction. I got to work on quests and stories. I got to balance a data set of like hundreds of cards and numbers. I got to actively like work closely with artists and programmers on a daily basis. I got to design new mechanics and like, you know, integrate them into a live gameplay system that actual people were like playing live around the world. I got to maintain our company's social presence and actually be social and like talk to people and actually go out there and not have to worry about like the iron hammer of Sony coming down and like, smiting me. I got to talk to press and I got to help kind of create our public message for our company and our games, and it was fucking awesome. It was a lot of fun. I also got to make cards like this where I mean, I didn't draw it. The guy that drew it's actually right there. He's awesome.
I didn't draw that one.
Oh. Anyway, so I got to write descriptions like
I did the background.
yeah, see, it counts. Which is a loose translation for stonefin hungry, where human need mid-dinner snack treats. And I got to put that onto our Facebook, and like that kind of stuff is really stupid, but you would not believe how much fun it was to do after having every single public message that you want to get out to gamers and the world filtered through the Sony corporate machine. Like it is such a drastically different experience. And I love Sony. I have a lot of great friends there, but it is so nice to be able to just talk directly to people that are playing your games, and the complete polar opposite between these two companies was amazing to me. And so after this, I got promoted to creative director on Dragon Academy, which I have, oops, that's not the slide that's up. So we have all these little dragons. They're adorable. I have stickers of all this. I have free t-shirt. Anything up here is free, by the way. There are stickers, there are t-shirts. There's like one of each t-shirt. There's not that many. There are a lot of stickers, so feel free to steal stickers of our adorable little dragons that Jeff did draw. I got it right this time. But Dragon Academy was basically a crash course in creative direction for me. It was my first game as creative director. It was my first game as a project manager. It was 12 weeks from pitch to launching V1.0. It was developed in Unity. I did voice acting. I did press, I did marketing, I did level design, I did effects, I did tuning, testing, social media, system design, writing, tasking, and overall directing. That was crazy. That was an intense 12 weeks. I didn't sleep much. I did learn that I have a certain knack for making weird dragon noises, like I would later then go, I don't know if anybody here has worked with Gleek in town before, or an audio studio right downtown. None of the guys are here today, or else I'd point at them. But I would later then get to do all of those weird little dragon voices in an actual voice recording studio. It was weird, just going in, putting on headphones and going. So that's the talent I have. And so that's Dragon Academy. It's a match 3 game. I'm not gonna say any words like candy or saga because I don't want to get sued. But I mean, clearly, it's Dragon Academy is a match 3 game at its core. But I think one of the things that is kind of going unspoken in the mobile app world right now is that a lot of games are a lot like a lot of other games, and that there are a lot of other ways that you can innovate and interject your own personality into them without like saying this is a clone. I would not call Dragon Academy a clone of Candy Crush Saga by any means. I think we all played it. I think we knew what that game did well, but I think we made our own game, and I think I'm still super proud of what we did with it. And it was a lot of fun to work on. In fact, I think of all of the games I've worked on over like the last 6 or 7 years, Dragon Academy was probably my favorite. Just because we got to have it was our game as a team, which was it's weird actually. I mean we have a team of like 10 or 11 people, and to actually be able to like look at the game and play it and say like this is our game, I think everybody on the team feels that way about it, is a unique feeling, and one that as we're going forward, I would really love to just be able to say is true of all of our games, that everybody's game is kind of like part of them, Because I think once people start personally investing in the games that they're making, people are going to be happier for one, and I think the games are going to be better, and you're going to end up with games that are more unique just inherently because of the people who made them. So after Dragon Academy, I got to do stuff like this, which is take 3 different Twitter accounts and just pretend I was having a conversation between 3 different people, which, like I say, the dumb stuff entertains me sometimes. But after Dragon Academy shipped, I'm going way over my time. I'll speed through the rest. So after Dragon Academy shipped, updates and new content were being worked on. The crunch time was over. What exactly do I do now? So I figured out that being a creative director is like that dog. You just wear a lot of hats. Alternatively, you really actually do all the things. So if I had to boil it down to like a list, it's kind of like that list, which is email, talking about ideas, tasks, press, marketing, customer support, scheduling, lots of Keynote, email, making new content, maintaining schedules, morale, testing, iteration, new ideas, more email, Keynote, social media, more scheduling, talking, psyching up, salesmanship, research, finding problems that aren't yet problems, email, prototyping, balancing, and email.
You forgot Skype.
I try to. I was lumping that mentally in with email. So basically, at least as far as our team goes, the creative director role is just kind of we have 4 or 5 projects, and they're all being developed at the same time, which basically means that once you walk into the office at any given day, what you're working on for that day is going to be completely unknown to you until somebody starts having a problem, or somebody needs something immediately, or somebody needs something sooner than immediately, or 4 different people need things immediately. But that's also awesome. It's a lot of fun. So personally, the next steps for me are begin to work on the next set of projects, identify design and process issues from the previous projects, look to solutions just to resolve things in general. Like when you see problems that become patterns and you start working to resolve those, you constantly write down new game ideas because you don't really ever know when you're going to finally be able to sit down and work on that game that you wanted to make forever. And just know what works and what doesn't in kind of every facet of life. Because if you get bored at work, then that's bad. Nobody should be happy. I mean, work is always going to be work, but I mean, we work in at least in games, we work in a fairly highly competitive field. If you're bored at work, then something's not right. Because there are a lot of different options out there for different kinds of personalities. For me, being able to just run around like a chicken with its head cut off is awesome. And being kind of stressed out and overworked is probably my natural state of things. But after Dragon Academy, we went on working on a game called Dragon Trials, which is with these guys. It's basically just taking the world that we had built up with Dragon Academy and making it twisted metal out of it. And we released that about a week ago. And then basically this is my day right now. It's Dragon Academy, Dragon Trials, it's question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, pitch, consult, prototype, as needed assistance on, question mark. TLDR, work hard and be the best at what you want to be.
Yeah.
That's it. I have no idea if that actually was a cohesive talk at all. But I guess questions or anything? Hi.
I'm still floored by the 12 people, 6 projects.
Yeah, me too.
How's that working?
Well, so the way that we have it structured is, so some of the projects are 2-people projects. One of our projects, I can't go into like names right now because most of them don't have them. But we have one project that is.
Not the people.
Huh?
The projects, not the people. Have names.
The people. Oh, those have names. Yeah, the people have names. They are not numbers. So we have one project that is basically a pairing of a programmer and a UI designer. and they're working very closely on that together. And then we have another project which is, it involves, we say that we're an 11, 12 person team, but we also have external resources, both as a result of working with Chaotic Moon, who has all of these, which is a fairly large company. I think they have like 70 or 80 people.
Is that like 108 or something?
Or 108 or something. So we bring in the resources that we have when we need them. In the case of another game we're working on with an external company, there's a wink to somebody in the audience, but they weren't paying attention. We have like me and Jeff are the people on the team that work on the project for Team Chaos, and then we work with the studio on other things. So we kind of just take the resources that we have and put them to their best use on a given project at a given time. So we're not actively making huge progress on, say, 5 projects a day, but we are making progress on 5 projects in a week. It's a matter of whose priorities are best put where. And that's kind of the nightmare that I have to manage sometimes. It's fun for me. It does entail a very unique kind of team composition, because you have to have a team that's willing to kind of step outside of their comfort zone a lot in order to actually do all of those things that need to get done. I still go back to doing programming when I need to. I'm working on a prototype for one of our games right now because nobody else is available to do it. And so the same is true with some of our artists and our programmers, and we just try to find a way to make it work. And if it doesn't work, then we try to find a way to make it work. That's not the best answer I realize, but.
So you're saying you did PR at some point? Or
Yeah.
Was that part of like being the designer?
I was actually a PR person for, I was employed as a PR person for a video game website for summer, which was really bad at the time because I'm kind of nervous and anxious and weird now. I was worse then. Now, PR is just kind of part of my job. I reach out to, I've made friends in the industry, which by the way, always make friends in the industry and always be nice to people in your industry. Don't be a dick. That's like the biggest useful piece of advice that you'll ever hear. Because everybody, I mean, this is true of almost every industry, but it feels especially true of games because it's the one I worked in mostly, so, you know. But there are always these crazy connections between people. And I've made friends with writers for Kotaku that weren't writers for Kotaku at the time. They were just writers that I now can just like paint like slide news stories like, hey, what do you think about posting this now, buddy? And I mean, you can totally take advantage of those situations. Don't be a dick about it, but that is basically what. It's not basically what PR is. There are actual PR companies that do like real PR, but for us, a PR is just having a list of contacts and trying to sell people on your game. I mean, that's basically what a designer does anyway. 90% of being a designer is just being able to sell people on your idea. If you can't sell people or get excited people about an idea of a game that you have, then you're not probably doing the right thing. If you can't get excited about it, then how are others going to get excited about it? And if you're not getting others excited about it, then who exactly is the project for? So PR just is something that used to like terrify me, but I don't know. Now it's just I'm excited talking about the games that I'm working on, and as a result, I hope other people get excited about it too.
So between Starhawk and Dragon Academy, and of course you're talking about working on multiple projects at a time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what are some examples of like lessons learned from previous projects? And how have those lessons that you've learned in different scenarios affect the current project's progress?
Well, what kind of lessons do you want? Do you want like lessons that
I got all night.
Personally, I've learned a lot of lessons like know your own boundaries or limits rather, because at some point there's always going to be work and there's always just going to be more work, and there's only so much energy you can expend before you just crash. Literally sometimes. And then I think that's the biggest for me. The other lesson as far as interpersonally is just don't work on projects with people that you don't want to be around, and don't be the kind of person that you don't want to work around, because you're going to work with these people every day. Or like I end up seeing most of my coworkers more than some of my good non-coworker friends on a frequently. Like I see them more than I see my family, which is weird. But that's because my family lives in Michigan, so it's not that weird. But so I mean, those are the two biggest lessons I think I've learned. Is just work, find people you want to work with and stick with them. Be loyal and be nice and be patient. Everybody's gonna have a bad day. Everybody's gonna come to work with their own kind of shit on their plate, and you just work through it with everybody. As far as practical production lessons, I would say personally, I think try to make sure that if you know that you're asking somebody to do something they don't want to do, which is going to have to happen because not everybody's going to want to do everything all the time, that you do your best to weigh it with something that you know they want to do. Or if you're okay or you want to be in a leadership or management role, then you do your best to take on the stuff that people don't want to be doing. In our case, that's customer support, which is a blast. I love it. But nobody really wants to do it, so I do it because somebody should do it. And I mean, it's better than making other people stress out about it. And it's way better than being sued by somebody who didn't get their money's worth from their game. Because if you have an unhappy customer, especially because all of our games so far have been free to play. If you have an unhappy customer, you are not doing free to play right at all. Because the customers you want them to be happy. The happier they are, the more they're going to tell people about the game. The more they tell people about the game, the more money you're going to make, the more customers you're going to have. It's all this cycle. Okay.
So Unity is pretty big platform, right, for mobile and stuff now, but there's other things kind of creeping up, like maybe other companies starting to make mobile versions of engines like Unreal or things like that. Do you guys kind of keep an eye on that, or is it you guys plan on using Unity for?
It's whenever you talk about switching tools, you have to take into account that all of the tools and pipelines that you have associated with a given tool are also going to go away. Yeah. So talking about switching tools is a significant undertaking, one that is not undertaken lightly ever, because you have people that are used to working a certain way. You have tools that are set up to work a certain way. You have processes that are set up to work a certain way. I mean, you might have an artist that that has a certain way of starting a model and getting it into the game, and that's going to completely change when you switch to a new system. I mean, there are so many different considerations when you talk about what tools to use and so on and so forth that there has to be a pretty significant reason to switch. If you're say, I don't know, a good example. I've been working in Unity for 5 or 6 years now, so it's hard for me to think otherwise. But I mean, UDK would be huge, but that does have it has its own unique issues or features. Let's call them features.
Right. Yeah.
In that it does enforce some kind of visual style. With that, you have to pretty dramatically change rendering tech or underlying pipeline in order to alter. But you also are just running into the fact that there's no editor for Mac. So that's one nice thing about Unity, aside from the fact that it's multi-platform for distribution, is that it's multi-platform for editing too. and that's huge. I mean, there are perks to not going multi-platform as well. Like working natively on a device, like writing iOS native code, always has the benefit of, I mean, you're taking advantage of Apple's core feature set directly, which is something that they tend to reward the people who use it. But you also are taking chances that that gain is going to be is offsetting what you'd be getting if you just went straight multi-platform from the beginning.
What games are you not getting to make at your current job that you want to do?
Pokemon. No, I would really love to make I would really love to make like a real good mobile Pokemon game. I don't think it exists. I mean, there's Pokemon X and Y and the 3DS and stuff, but I mean, they're so, like, those are so set in their own ways that they're not going to hugely change anytime soon. But it's also, to do it right is a pretty massive undertaking. And I still, even though I have a lot of ideas for what I want to do with one of those, I still haven't been able to, I can't even say excited about working on one, like finding an idea or a design for one that I'm excited about working on yet. I also think there's a Monster Hunter is a pretty awesome game that hasn't gotten enough love in the West and shit. So I'd like to do something like that. I always grew up with Final Fantasy Tactics, which I also think is another just hugely like one of those timeless games. I think those three.
So I'm curious kind of about Team Chaos's place in the Austin mobile game community.
We're here.
So I know that, which is great. Like, and it's, I mean, I think it's good that there are studios like that in town that are like, consistently putting out mobile stuff and like, a real kind of going group of, like a bigger group of people, not just sort of one or two guys kind of doing their own like totally indie thing. But I mean, how does Chaotic Moon, the larger company, kind of view Team Chaos? Like, what is it wanting? What are its goals for Team Chaos? Because I know that like Chaotic Moon does projects for huge clients and probably makes like crazy money doing custom app development. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that the Team Chaos games have been unsuccessful, but I don't get the impression they've sold.
What are you saying? No, I understand.
I don't get the impression that they've sold like insane numbers of copies either. So it's like, how, like, at what point is what y'all are doing satisfactory for Chaotic Moon? Like, how do you?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer.
Measure that.
I don't have the answer to that question.
Well, we're all addicted to the game. Yeah. It's actually this like huge joke at work. They're like, you guys gotta play it. Team Chaos got it out, and now we're also addicted to it. I think we play it constantly at work during work, and no one can give a shit about it because we're supposed to be playing it.
We're testing.
Yeah. We're testing.
The answer, there is an answer to the question. I'm trying to figure out how I can word it. Right now, we are a sister company to Chaotic Moon as far as games go. They have an interest in games. Our investors, who are also partners with Chaotic Moon, have an interest in Team Chaos. So as long as that interest stays and there's the potential that it will grow, which that potential is there, and we are growing. Our portfolio has changed radically, just like in the last, I think, month alone. So we're first quarter of this year is a big quarter for us, and beyond that, we have a bunch of other goals. But basically, we just we're going to go along our current path and hope to be successful. And I mean, it's not just blind hope. I mean, we do have analytics and like people who know things about money and things. But hopefully it works out. Basically, it's my until it doesn't, then I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
You said that you were either interested in teaching or you had mentored and taught, and you wrote programming books and stuff like that. I'm actually a learning scientist, and I'm coming to games from trying to find that intersection of deliberate learning and engaging gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm not the first one to try this, but I'm curious to know if you think that there's a future for games to meet education again in a better way and in a more useful way to the general public.
Fucking absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my ideas that I would like to explore at some point as a kind of like a middle ground between my current job and being a impoverished actual employed high school teacher, which is horrible, by the way. Which that's a travesty that teachers get paid that poorly. I'm just gonna use that soapbox for a second.
I used to be
I think edutainment, it deserves like legitimate like attempt, and I know a lot of people at our studio also agree with that. I think edutainment could be huge, and I think it deserves like actual like good talent and good thought and good reasons and good like morals and like actual like all of those like core tenets of like education just into games. And I think like there is a huge opening for that somewhere. I want somebody to fill it. If somebody doesn't fill it for me, I'm gonna try and fill it. I think there's a huge possibility there. That's all I got though.
Mind if I add to that? Sorry.
Yes, I do.
I've heard of, talking the same lines of talking about gamification, and I've heard of a few college professors starting to gamify their courses. Rather than giving grades, they give experience points and badges. And
oh boy, we're talking about something way different. Yeah. So, I mean, you keep going, but.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, going along the same lines of edutainment, just a way of using games to educate people, or to encourage them to want to learn.
See, I think gamification is something more sinister, basically. I think it's taking the things that make games. I think it's looking at games as at the addictive quality of games and trying to draw those away from the game and into real life. I think gamification is a kind of a dirty word. I think of edutainment as being a combination software and game. And while the distinction there is really, really fuzzy, gamification at this point has kind of reached more of a it has more of a marketing and business focus than it does, I think, an education focus.
It also distracts from the learning objectives and replaces it with an extrinsic system.
Do you know of any examples that do what you're describing well, like the difference between gamification and edutainment?
Not really. I wish I did. I mean, I always, whenever I think of edutainment, I think of
Element Labs is a good studio. They're learning sciences.
Really? All right, cool. With that.
I think in Reality is Broken, Game McGonigal wrote about at least one school that has changed their entire curriculum, and it's none of the negative parts of gamification. It's basically like just saying, these are all the things we want you to learn, and here are some gamified aspects to kind of, like earning experience points to kind of motivate you a little bit. Yeah. It also makes it more flexible where like, you don't have to go to class and learn math from like 11 to 12. Yeah. You can work on whatever interests you now and kind of pace yourself and change that kind of stuff. And I forget what the studio is called, but if you look that up online, it probably would be pretty cool.
Jane McGonigal's approach is not, I would not classify as gamification so much as.
She technically doesn't like to use that word.
Yeah, she's more of a just like self-empowerment, basically.
Games for change.
Stuff.
I think it basically boils down to who's controlling the motivations. Yeah. Like if you're being honest about it and you're saying, yeah, we're games are addictive. I mean, like we want you to buy the game or whatever, of course, because that's how we're making it in the first place. But if you're honest about saying like we're using these things to try to help people motivate themselves and help them steer the way through education, which otherwise would be really boring. That's one thing. But if you're using it behind the scenes to try to get people to buy more stuff and things without telling them what's going on, that's a whole different ballgame. Even though the techniques might be identical, it largely comes down to motivation.
Anything else? Any other questions? All right, cool. Well, I guess thanks so much.
Thank you.